Hi, everyone. So today I've been thinking about things lately based on some of the things I'm seeing with people I either know or run into. Now, this isn't clients. These people that work with me are consciously aware they are going through something. But what I'm starting to see more of, and many of you are probably seeing the same thing, is almost like in passing or more chance encounters or shorter encounters or people who are maybe acquaintances, you're starting to see a broader group of people, at least I am, starting to go through their awakening journey, but they don't know it, okay? They don't know it. And as we move further and further in our growth in our higher consciousness in this awakening journey, we have the ability, it's almost like sonar or radar or whatever technology you want to call it, but where we're able to hone in on and pick up on those who are starting that process. And it's hard to explain that if you haven't experienced, but I guarantee you will. It's almost like you have kind of the intuitive sixth sense of being able to like seek those people out or run into those people, because remember, we're magnetic and we're also activators. All right. So keep that in mind as we go through our journey, as we grow in our consciousness, we grow in our love, in our heart space, our field is stronger. And our field, that's the part that matters, not the words that come out of our mouth to people we think might be awakening. That's not what matters. In fact, that can be opposing to their journey. It can actually put them off and frighten them, frankly, or make them think we're part of some religion trying to convert them, because that's just the name Spiritual Awakening in and of itself. It's kind of been, I don't want to call it Christianized. Maybe they took it first. I have no idea, or I shouldn't say they, but you know what I'm talking about. Like the words we choose to use to explain these things without those individuals starting to come into their own awareness can be very off-putting. So what this is about today is to talk a little bit about that awareness and a few of the things that you can do to support them. And it might not be what you think. I think we all go through this phase of wanting to just, as we wake up, to tell everybody, right? Like to tell everyone and what the experience is like and explain to them. That doesn't work, okay? For the most part, that does not work. So I want to talk a little bit about this today, particularly, well, for all of us, because at different stages, different things start to happen. So those of us who've been going through this quite some time are, I don't want to call it further along in our journey, but we've been doing this a while, right? We have already likely encountered some of these things. However, what starts to happen as we grow in our own awakening journey, as I just said, our field expands. So we're going to have the potential for even more encounters like this. And we need to be able to have some kind of toolbox to be able to utilize when we do run into these folks. And it can be chance encounters, it can be about anything. But remember, the most important thing that we have when we're running into someone is our field and us. Just by being there, maybe making eye contact, that kind of thing, that makes a difference. Now, you're not going to necessarily know who these people are in the grocery store, right? But I want you to know the mere fact that you are out where you are makes a huge difference, and that you're doing your work, all right? So what we're talking about today is for those that we start to understand, oh, wow, that individual is got my acquaintance, my friend, whatever, and we're going to give you a couple examples here too. They're displaying signs of waking up, but do they know? And what can I do to help? Well, first of all, the biggest thing you can do to help is to not do anything, honestly. Is to remember your field is the strongest part for you. What comes out of your mouth, those words, like I said, oftentimes is not the thing that'll shut everything down, potentially, for most people. So one of the first things you want to think about is, okay, because it kind of gets exciting, right? Like you see somebody waking up, it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And you want to talk about it. Nope. Observe and just be. Observe and be. Use that desire and energy to spout words and use it internally to grow your light. Bring it back in, ground and center, because remember, they're needing grounding. The mere fact that you're nearby and you're with them and they're starting to talk about something that sounds like awakening or these experiences they're having where we know those are symptoms of starting to go through a spiritual awakening, they need grounding. People need grounding. And you don't need to say, hey, I'll ground for you, right? You just need to be. You need to be. So this is not well, maybe it is revolutionary because as humans, we want to talk all the time and teach and help and, spout the thing. That's not what we want to do. We want to be in solidity of ourselves. We want to take that grounded approach and we want to just observe. And we want to listen. If someone wants to talk to you about this, it's not your job to then explain what's going on. It's not your job. But what I will say is what you really want to wait for, and this is assuming you have some level of contact with these people regular, not just a one-time thing, because there's nothing you're going to do for somebody you're just meeting occasionally. Now, the universe can take care of those things by, I don't know, that person might say, hey, let's stay in touch. And you trade, contact information. And then it's for that individual to be able to reach out to you with respect to the awakening part of this. So, for example, let's say they connect with you to continue building a friendship. It's not for us to say, hey, do you remember what you're talking about that last time? I think you're going through spiritual awakening. Let's talk about that. Let them come to you. Number 2, we observe, we be, we ground, we share our light in that way, in a silent manner. And then we let them come to us as needed. And then what we can do is we can give them breadcrumbs if that story opens up. So basically being there for them as they want you to. Again, I keep going back to it is not our job to explain what's going on for these people unless they are desirous of this. But there will be conversation around this potentially where you're able to talk about shift and change without getting into the depths of spiritual awakening. This is actually, from everything that I have seen and also experienced, this is a cultivated skill. It is a cultivated skill. We all step in the muck and want to spout everything to everyone that we think might be going through the journey or explain to everyone what we're going through and try to get them to come along. But that's not how it works. We don't get people to come along with us, right? It is a natural process. It's an outgrowth of being human and the stages we're in. But remember, you're an activator. All of us who are doing this consciously, you're an activator. Everyone's going through awakening. I know, we may not think that, especially when we look at the world out there. Every single person is going through awakening. The difference between them and us, we're consciously aware, and that makes all the difference, all right? It doesn't mean that the things that they're encountering on their journey aren't part of the awakening. It's whether they're going to wake up to the fact and see what they're being brought to them for greater awareness. So keep this in mind. You're an activator. You're someone who is sharing your light. You're waking people up by the mere fact that you are around them. And it can be chance encounters. I'm here to tell you. We are put, as we've talked about before, throughout the entire world. We're like pinpoints of light. And when our light grows, we spark the light in others. Remember, we talk about the divine light. We are sparking that light within others as well. But this is all about the human part of it, where we can totally turn people off, right? And also look like we're in some religious cult of some kind. And we don't want that. So to be able to practice observing, practice closing our mouths, practice listening, practicing being, practicing grounding, and then being there when that person ultimately may come to you for assistance. And we don't know when that will be or if it will ever be. But it's not for us to initiate a huge conversation into spiritual awakening and then see the fright in their eyes and not even have any frame of reference for that. Because remember, Most of us were naturally brought into the spiritual awakening process, and we learned on our own. Remember the lonely period, which a lot of us still have, right? The lonely period of like, I don't have anybody to talk to. I don't know anyone. You figured it out. So will they. All right. So will they. Now, the one thing I think that we all get hung up about too is we know that people can turn their backs on the awakening journey. We don't want people to do that, but that's not in our control. That's their journey, right? That's their journey. We need to be there for them when they are ready, if in fact they choose to use us as assistants. I will tell you this, you will turn them off more and more to the journey if we are the ones initiating the conversation and the explanation of what's going on. So I think it's really important for us to see others through awakened and awakening eyes. Eyes of understanding the journey we were on, understanding that this is their journey. They're new to it. They're infants in that process. And, just like a little child, they need to learn to crawl before they can walk. And lots of times they got to make the mistake. Well, most of the times they got to make the mistakes themselves. They fall, they get up, they do all the things, right? They do all the things. That's this as well. So you will be connected with the people that you need to be connected with for the time you are connecting with them. All right. If you are meant to be a counselor to them, it will happen. But what I will say to you, you're going to feel an energy. If you are the one to initiate a big conversation with somebody who is, you think is, because most likely they're not going to be able to identify it, that you think is going through this journey, you're going to start to feel an icky energy of like, okay, this doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm just like, because we become more sensitive to all this. So remember that. Know how you feel about the situation you're in, because everybody's situation is different. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples where ultimately what I did over a period of months was I was able to tell both these people, one quicker than the other, that they're going through the spiritual awakening journey, but without saying oftentimes the spiritual awakening journey. All right. So there are a couple examples of this, and hopefully they will be helpful to you. Again, I know this sounds funny, but like I said, I work with people in my business who are awakening, right? Most people know they are. Others are coming to me because they don't understand what's going on and they're looking for answers. That's different. That's a different conversation, all right? So these are people who I'm acquainted with through either groups I'm involved in or personal encounters. So again, I have had a journey with it because ultimately I can really identify people who are going through the awakening journey. And it's kind of uncomfortable for me in a way, because not that I'm a rescuer, but I'm a helper, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to be able to express this to them. But I've learned patience, and I've learned to be able to handhold in a way where I'm silent and I'm not talking a lot and I'm listening about what they're going through. So I'm going to give you two examples. The one example actually culminated in the understanding of this person going through the spiritual awakening journey, kind of without using those words, culminated much faster. We were in a group together, and as we know, the awakening journey can be brought about very often by trauma. A lot of bodily trauma, a lot of illnesses, that kind of thing, because of course, and this is another conversation, so much of all of what we've done to ourselves is held in the body, whether it be through past lives, through experiences we've had, through trauma, all of that is held in the body because we haven't dealt with it, right? So part of this, obviously, a big part of this journey is the healing process. Well, so people get taken to their knees often because they're not aware, they're not waking up to the things they need to change in themselves, right? So illness, injury, things like relationships falling apart, work, leaving their jobs, being fired from their jobs, all those kinds of things. We start to understand those signs and we start to see those. Well, in this particular instance with this individual, they had a workplace injury where they had had a pretty severe concussion. And so I was a co-facilitator in a group with them, and they were unable to facilitate for some of this time. So though this individual and I were talking quite a bit about their injury and how they were recovering and what was going on. And so as I had gotten to know this individual previous to the concussion, and we start to know this stuff too. This journey is all about balancing our life, not doing this frenetic, Pisces age energy thing of like work all the time and give ourselves away to others and that whole thing. And there are a lot of people that do that, right? And we've been some of them to a degree or another. So we wake up to that, right? Well, this individual was overgiving on overdrive. And I saw it. I was seeing it. I was seeing the signs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all about that individual feeling about this big in themselves, and instead working constantly, no time for themselves, having all of themselves given to others, making themselves incredibly available. Give you a good example and I'm not criticizing this, I'm giving you examples of how this shows up, right? And so that you can identify that as well. So what was happening is I was seeing this imbalance, incredible imbalance, where even when we were done with our meetings that we facilitated, which we cut, it was an hour, that individual would stay for like another half hour, 40 minutes to an hour to talk with people who just wanted to hang around and talk. Well, this was common for this individual. Also to be able to offer themselves up, waiting for people to join. And how I always said it was, if nobody's joining after 15 minutes, see ya, kind of thing. I didn't say it like that, but these are boundaries. So it's about boundaries. And so there was this great desire to just be available all the time, right? And I felt this, in fact, is very uncomfortable. And as you know, when we make the shifts and changes in ourselves and we start finding balance in our lives, we do all the things that we're working on doing and being very aware, it's uncomfortable when we feel that energy in others. All right. So I was really uncomfortable with that, as much as I enjoyed working with this person. And then they had the workplace injury with the big concussion. And all of a sudden I remember I'm a channel too. So I was getting information. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so weeks went on as I was still not saying anything. I knew that, as we know, if we don't read the signs of the universe over time, honestly, I know this sounds dramatic, but it is dramatic. We'll get taken down. We will get taken down. To chill out, to have to be able to go, whoa, to knock us like she was. Remember, knock us silly in that sense, in this individual situation, and to be able to have to, for weeks on end, not work, not give of themselves, but to go inward. And as I sat and listened, without saying one word about spiritual awakening, even though they knew what I did for a living without knowing the detail, they knew I was an intuitive channel and an energy healer. That's all we talked about. But remember, we'd been around each other for a good 6 to 9 months, once a week. This individual finally says to me, I think, and they were able to speak in these terms, but that the universe, God, source, whatever, is trying to give me a wake-up call because I've had one of these before. And I just listened. Of course, I wanted to. I'm a talker. I've learned not to talk. I just listened. And then they started to speak in kind of spiritual terms. And so, remember, this is 9 months in almost to getting to know this individual. And they're going through this long journey of recovery. And they're starting to be aware that they need to make shifts and changes. But they don't totally understand it. And that's where I was able to enter in. I had observed, I had listened, I had spoken to the Awakening Journey. And as I recall in our first conversation about this, I said, well, I will have to agree with you. I feel as though that you are being asked to look at the balance in your life of giving and receiving, because there was really no receiving, right? At least in my estimation, everything I saw. There was just, 110% overdrive from the most beautiful place in their heart, right? Of giving. And yet, as we know, going into these Aquarian ages, we have to be in balance. We have to be in balance. So, with that said, I said, yes, you are being asked to look at things with new eyes. And so we got talking about the metaphor or the analogy of I guess I'll just say the synchronicity of using a brain injury, a like knock in the head, wake up call kind of thing, right? And recovering from that and taking the time for self and being able to be aware of that. So we got talking. I finally found the entry. It was not like I was looking for it, because I know how this works with these conversations. But at this point, they were actually able to start talking about, yeah, I need to say no, I need to do this. And they started making some significant, small but significant changes in their journey. And it's so interesting. You'll see the patterns when this happens for you. And that's when I got to talk about, I don't think I ever said spiritual awakening, but obviously if that individual went to my website, they would certainly know. But I made some reference to, this is a journey we're all on, finding a balance in our life, coming into more of seeing ourselves as worthy of receiving and taking time for ourselves. And I said, it's all part of this higher consciousness journey, but it begins with us individually. So anyway, we got talking and we were having some really good conversations. Now, the interesting part about this is this was on the downside of this group that I was in. It was fading away for other reasons. And there's a lot of shift and change in that business that this group was a part of. Anyway, needless to say, I now know. I'm not in that group any longer. I just knew my time was coming because I could feel it before even this individual's injury. And I knew my time had come and I could just feel it. And then there were shifts and changes in that business where we had volunteered to facilitate part of like one of the groups. Anyway, and I said, my time's come. I'm teaching tennis now. I don't have time for this any longer. But by then, I was able to light the little fire. And not that you have to do this. I mean, the opportunity will come up if it's meant to, right? But I could tell I was getting ready to leave the group and this happens. And I was able to light that little bit of spark of understanding and awareness that this individual was starting to have, but I was able to frame some things around it through a very natural conversation, one that did not alienate at all. And now it's been about 3 months and I'm no longer with that group. We will come into people's awareness and lives as we are meant to for the time we are meant to. And this, you'll know it, it's a patience process. We are there for reason and purpose. It may be as much as being in their awareness, sharing our light. And we're not going to always know, obviously, because here's the thing, everybody's waking up. And that's a part of the conversation I want to have here next and what that actually might look like, even though we might not know. But anyway, consciously. So that's one example right there of how that unfolded. What I really noticed was the grounding, helping hold light, hold space. And you're not doing anything. Like I was just participating, but because I was there, I knew what was happening. I could feel it. So anyway, now I'm no longer part of that group. It's just like it never happened kind of thing. But I was there for the period of time I was meant to be there. And you will find that as well. And if you're not consciously aware that this is how this happens, how you as an awakening person are actually helping without kind of knowing you're helping, and then it starts to become a pattern of how this works where you come into a certain thing and then you leave at a certain time too. All right? You might stay for a period of time. You might then question, why did I ever get in that group? Why was that? You're going to start to know these things, why you're put out there. Because remember what I said recently, recently within the last year, we now are being brought out into the world. Many of us being brought out into the world. And this is one way it happens, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of another person. So this is my contractor. You guys know my story if you've been watching me, and I'm not going to go through it again, but it was a almost 9-month process of my house having major water issues, leak that over time from the refrigerator line, which culminated in one thing after another of this contractor who I originally had coming just to clean my gutters, who was a handyman, turns out builds everything from, office buildings to cleaning out gutters. Just happens to be very talented. Long story short, we have a lot of lives together. All of a sudden that just showed up for me. I knew why this individual was there. Well, I try to summarize this because it is a fascinating story. It should be a little book in itself. But anyway, during this time that this individual was working on my home, like he was here almost probably 3-4 times a week, for that long. It was, yes. We got to know each other. He's sharing his story and his journey, and we couldn't be living more different lives. We couldn't be, and this is not a criticism, but we couldn't be living in more different frequencies and vibrations. That's what I will say to you. We could not be more disparate. But I knew why, because I knew him from a past life, and I knew the past life very specifically. Needless to say, during this journey, things started to break down for him. I only thought, oh, well, we've known each other from a time before. And he's pretty intuitive. And so he said to me a few weeks after we met, he said, I know I'm supposed to meet you. I know I got this feeling, I got this sense. And then he started telling me some of the things that happened traumatically in his life, including losing his mother in a very significant way. Needless to say, when he was young. So he's telling me about his journey, and I also realize he's intuitive and gets hits, and eventually he kind of knows what I do, but nobody ever fully knows what I do, right? Until they're ready to work with me or go and read my website, and then they half the time don't understand. Okay, so anyway, midway through, all these things are breaking down in his life, and I don't need to go through all the detail because we know what those things can be. Everything under the sun, the whole carpet gets pulled out from under you. But at the same time, this miraculous thing happens. Now, mind you, this individual's been a contractor. Here we go again with balance. Been a contractor for 20 plus years and done all this work. But I have never seen someone who has zero free time. Works every single day. Probably 10-hour days. This is not an exaggeration. There is no free time. There's a lot of health stuff going on. There's a lot of breakdown and what I, again, feel as avoidance of what's really going on in their journey. So there's just work, right? We all know how that works. And some of us were like that previously, right? Or maybe be going through making that shift and change on our own right now. Anyway, midway through, all of a sudden, he comes and says, you're not going to believe this. And I'm thinking, well, by now, I think I understand why this is all happening and why you're here. I didn't tell him that, but because again, remember, you're going to do this too. You're going to know the story. You're going to know the story, but you're not going to talk about it because it's going to be off-putting and you're not going to be able to do your job, right? If you're meant to do this job, right? In a way that is an enlightened person having someone else starting to go through their journey. We're just not going to spout this out. We're not. Anyway, needless what? And if you do, it won't work, is what I will tell you. So anyway, he says, I just had a family business drop in my lap that I now own. Now, there's a longer story around that, but this was the passion of his from an early age to own this business, but the family ended up selling it, and it's connected to his mother's passing, which is really important for him, right? And this business has been super successful, but it wasn't in the family at all. Lo and behold, while he's working with me midway through, because remember, we're activators. I'm not saying I did this. I'm saying because of this activation, his field starts to, things start changing. We kind of break down barriers for them in a way, right? To start this process. I think a lot of you understand this. But anyway, what happened was, he said, my attorney contacted, don't ask me how this happened. I don't remember exactly the specifics, but all I know is he contacted, I think, by the attorney for the people who wanted to sell the business and said, we'd like to sell. Well, guess what? He's the only one in the family that wanted it. Nobody else wanted it. And honestly, it's a way, I'll just call it, it's a shift out. And I saw this too, of what he's currently doing and being able to I'll just say, find a way out of construction where someone is getting older and having difficulty doing that. But it dropped in his lap. He took over the business, bought the business, and is now have the opportunity, as I told him, to make a pivot. I said, this is an opportunity. You're having an opportunity to make a pivot. And so anyway, point in this is I'm standing there astounded. And he's like, oh my God. So anyway, we keep going through this journey of 9 months together. That happened midway through. And as this continued and we wound down, I left him off at this business being handed to him still doing his work. And then he had a few little things to follow up for me, which he still does. So we've stayed in contact on occasion. And he wrote me last week. Now, mind you, he stopped work in February of this year, pretty much. We were done. And we've been communicating off and on. And I said, hey, when are you coming over to do the final spindle work? Blah, 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 right? And he goes, I need to talk to you. Anyway, once we talked, he said, I just got to tell you, remember, he's intuitive. And I haven't said a word about spiritual awakening at all. But he says, Carolyn, ever since I met you, my life has fallen apart. And he kind of laughed, but he was dead serious. And I thought, oh God, the next thing he's going to think is I cursed him. Because he knows what I do for work, right? And I'm like, oh God, or whatever. And he says, and he started listing off all these things that were in addition to the things that were already starting to happen. All right. But remember, he's got the golden, or the little pivot of that business, right? And he and I had talked about that as a pivot opportunity. And he says, just all these things. And he started listing off big things, right? Big things. Now, remember what I said about his frequency and vibration and some of the choices he's made on how he lives, right? And this includes all the way through, personal care, taking care of self, all of this, trauma from the past, choices, boundaries. It goes on and on. I mean, it's extreme, right? And so he's like, oh my God. He says, I knew I met you for a reason, but why is everything bad happening? And I said, you're going through a shift and change in your journey. I said, this is the journey we are all on. I said, but you're becoming consciously aware of it. And so anyway, he said, I want to talk to you more. I don't have time to talk right now. I said, that's okay. I just want you to know it's natural. And I said, you're needing to make new choices for yourself and reflect on the choices you have made, what serves you, what doesn't serve you. I mean, that's as big a summary as I could give. Now, mind you, we'd led up to being able to talk about this because he knows what I do, right? Knows what I do to a degree. So anyway, as it turns out, the interesting thing was he and I don't talk that much. The next day, because I kept thinking, how do I just kind of tell him briefly what's going on? I don't know when I'm going to be able to do this with him, but he hasn't initiated again because guess what? That next day, up on how stuff just pops up on your phone. I get this woman who, oh my gosh, puts a post up, and she's amazing, by the way. Her name's, if you're on Instagram, I'm only on spiritual stuff. Her name is Big Taj. I think it's Tajj. She's amazing. Anyway, I don't get to see her that much, but she pops up for the first time, and lo and behold, she's talking about, when things start to break down in your life and all the bad stuff starts happening, I'm like, whoa. So anyway, I listened to it. Oh, I just got chills. I listened to it, and I'm like, all right, this is what I'm sending to him. And I sent to him, and I said, hey, since our last conversation, which was the day before, this popped up. I said, spend some time alone in a quiet space. This is deep, but listen to it. It's going to help you understand what is going on. I said, and I'm happy to talk further when you're ready. And that's the last I've heard from him. Now, I'll hear from him again. But again, that was about a month ago. So again, remember, there's the breadcrumbs that we leave for people. We don't throw them the whole loaf uncut for them to cut themselves, right? We leave breadcrumbs. So I really wanted to give you those two examples because we're being called, I'm telling you this right now, we're being called, as it will unfold for you individually over time as you go through your journey, when you're into certain stages and phases, and we're being called to support others. Now remember, we're doing that already just by doing our individual work, but we're also being called out to others in the physical way, right? to connect and assist where it makes sense. And this is happening in spades now because people, I'm telling you again, everybody is waking up. The difference between them and us is they are not consciously aware. Now, you may run into people who are the last people in the world you would think are waking up because they don't even express that through their human self, right? There's no understanding. There's no awareness if I need to change the way things are. But you're going to see the patterns in their life. You know the patterns in their life. You're going to see it. You can even see this with people that you don't know. Like if you're connected in, I don't know, you can just see it out there. You can see it out there in people. But the thing is, these things start to happen to wake people up. That's what we start to become aware of, and doesn't mean they're aware at all or that they're going to change anything until they're brought to their knees. I'm having this happen right now with a couple people that I know where I want to, more than anything, go, okay, hold on. Here's where you are. You've got to change because guess what's going to happen next? And this is what happens. Guess what happens next if we don't wake up? I mean, and we know the universe will pound us because this is important times. So, but the thing is, I'm not doing that. I wrote a note instead with some very subtle, getting to the root cause of the issue. And it's a physical issue. Getting to the root cause of what's causing this issue, which is that deep dive, right? So it can be a very stressful journey, assisting others in their journey because we know so much. I'll just say, we know how this works, but remember, every single person is on their journey. And look back at your journey too. Look, the people showed up when they were meant to, but this is also very much a unique individual journey over time for people to wake up to. And then when we're meant to, remember, we will be brought into their awareness. They will be brought into our awareness as it makes sense. And they will also leave our awareness. We will leave their awareness as we are meant to. So just keep this in mind again. We are activators. We are all, every single one of us, awakening, even if it doesn't even seem like it. And you can know this because you can look back on your life, particularly those of us who are older, and go, oh wow, I see how all that happened. And I'm starting to understand how it led to where I am today. It's all part of the awakening journey. Also, remember that you will see signs, potentially, of someone awakening, but you're here to hold space, to ground, to listen, to be the observer, and just to be there. Because remember, we do more energetically than we ever can with our mouths. So with that today, I'm going to leave you. I hope this has been helpful to you. Like I always say, take what resonates, toss the rest aside, but stay open. Hopefully there's a nugget or two here that will assist you in your journey forward. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. Check out my services at purplerainhealing.com, where I offer spiritual awakening mentoring, channeled messages, past lives, and energy healing. I would love to work with you in your awakening journey, whether you choose one of those or my one-on-one spiritual awakening mentoring. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.